29 years old and I live alone in a small town in Michigan. On weekends, I come here to escape the busy city life. I grew up in the city and got tired of it, so I enjoy the peace and quiet of the countryside. My house is big, with lots of land around it, and the neighbors aren't close by. It's the kind of place you'd see in a horror movie. There's not much crime here because the town is small and the population is low. I don't have many friends in the area, but I don't come here for that. I come to be alone and relax away from work and people. One Friday, shortly after I arrived at my house, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to see a guy with a clipboard. Right away, I knew he was trying to sell something. He asked if I was happy with my security system. I told him I didn't have one and wasn't interested. I even joked that no one would want to break into my ugly house. He started telling me about recent break-ins in the area, which I hadn't heard about. He asked who I lived with, and I said I lived alone, so I didn't think I needed a security system. He was persistent and asked for my phone number, saying he would check back in a couple of weeks and would waive the installation fee. That sounded good to me, so I gave him my number. He thanked me and left. After that, I went to the kitchen to make dinner, and then started watching Yellowstone in the living room. I was on a binge, watching episode after episode for hours. Around 11 p.m., there was another knock at the door. It was very late for someone to be knocking, especially around here. I didn't know my neighbors well, so I didn't think it was one of them. I ignored the knocking and kept watching my show. The knocking continued, but I still didn't get up. I wasn't about to open the door at 11 p.m. After the third round of knocks, I started to worry. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving. I went to the door and asked who was there. There was no reply. This felt like a horror movie. I wasn't going to open the door. I shouted through the door that I wasn't interested, and that I had a gun and wasn't afraid to use it. I didn't actually have a gun, but it was a good bluff. The knocking stopped, so I thought they had left. I went back to the couch, but then my cell phone rang. The caller ID said it was 911 emergency services. I had never received a call from 911 before, and didn't think they would call like that. I answered, and a man on the line asked if I was George. I said yes. He claimed to be from the police department, and said there were officers outside my house because there had been a report of a crime in my area. He said they had questions for me. This didn't feel right. I asked the caller to have the officers come to the window so I could see them before I opened the door. He said they couldn't do that, but they were already outside. This made no sense. I said I wasn't going to answer any questions and hung up. Even if it was the real police, I didn't have to open the door. This felt like a trap. The same number called again, but I didn't answer and put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I decided to call 911 myself to ask if the calls were real. The real 911 operator said the calls were fake and advised me to lock all my doors and find something to use as a weapon while I waited for the police to arrive. While I was on the phone with the operator, I heard someone trying to open the back door. Then, I heard loud bangs as if someone was trying to break it down. I told the operator, and she said the police would be there in less than 10 minutes. But I needed them now. I went to the door and shouted that I had a gun and wasn't afraid to use it. I heard someone yell back, claiming to be the police, but it was followed by another loud bang on the door. The back door is next to a window, unlike the front door. I looked out the window and saw two masked men trying to break in. They wore disturbing masks that looked like sacks with eye and mouth holes cut out. They saw me looking through the window and must have realized I was on the phone with the real police because they ran off into the darkness. About 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. This time, it was the actual police. I let them in, and one of the officers searched my entire property. The police cars parked in front of my house with their lights on for about half an hour, which probably scared off anyone thinking of coming back. After the police left, one of the cars stayed in front of my house for hours. I'm sure they left at some point during the night. I decided I wouldn't open the door to anyone unannounced anymore. pretty sure the guy pretending to sell security systems was just checking out which house to target. He and his group were faking 911 calls to get people to open their doors late at night. I went to my closest neighbors to ask if the guy had knocked on their doors too. They said no. For some reason, my house was the only one on the street targeted. I guess I was the first house they tried, and I seemed like an easy target. I was driving through Colorado in the middle of the night. I was in Tabernash around 1 a.m. when I stopped at a gas station to refuel and grab a snack. After that, I got back on the road. There weren't any cars around at this hour, especially on the roads I was driving, but I still obeyed the speed limit. It was late, I was tired, and you never know where a cop might be hiding. I was going about 55 on this winding road when suddenly, those dreaded flashing lights appeared in my rearview mirror. I looked in the mirror and saw a car behind me with flashing red and white lights, so I pulled over. I checked my speed and confirmed I was only going maybe 2 mph over the limit. I pulled onto the side of the road, and the vehicle behind me did the same. I was really annoyed. I had never been pulled over before, and I always drive cautiously. I immediately felt like I was being pulled over unfairly. As the officer stepped up to my car, I lowered the window. He greeted me and asked for my license and registration. Trying to act confident, I asked, "Is there a reason you pulled me over?" He said he would get to that in a minute. I told him I knew I wasn't speeding, swerving, and none of my taillights were out, so I didn't want to hand over my license if this was an unlawful stop. I took a closer look at his uniform. It seemed off. He was dressed all in black with a black vest that looked like a police vest, but it didn't say police anywhere on it. His badge didn't say police either. It said Criminal Task Force. He kept insisting on seeing my license and registration. I flat out asked him, "Are you an actual cop?" He replied that he was part of an undercover unit and asked for my license again. I asked for his badge number. He said he didn't have to give that to me, which I knew was a lie. I also noticed his lights were only red and white, lacking blue. I wasn't 100% sure if this meant he was a fake cop, but it added to my suspicion. The man started demanding I get out of the car. I said, "Respectfully, I'm not comfortable talking to you until you can get a supervisor here." He raised his voice and repeated for me to get out of the car. I replied, "I don't think you're a real cop. If you were, you wouldn't have a problem getting your supervisor here." I rolled up the window a bit, and he didn't like this. He yelled at me to open the door and put his hands on my window, trying to unlock the door. I pushed his hands off, started the car, and put it in drive. I heard him shout, "Stop!" as I floored it away from him. My heart was racing. I hoped I was right, or I was going to jail. But if I was right, this man impersonating a cop showed just how terrifying the situation was. As I was driving away, going the speed limit, I saw the car behind me with the lights still on, fast approaching. I did the only thing I could think to do, and called 911. I told the operator I was being chased by someone who I believed was a fake cop. I explained that he refused to give his badge number. His car was unmarked. It didn't have blue lights, and his uniform didn't say police. After asking my location and more details, she told me the nearest police station was the Fraser Winter Park Police Department and requested I go there. She said she would dispatch an officer to meet me. The guy in his car followed me halfway to my destination with his lights still on, but suddenly, at an intersection, he turned his lights off and turned right, driving out of view. He was gone. I realized my suspicion was correct. The whole time, I had been pulled over by a guy pretending to be a cop. I still drove to the police station, where I saw a cop sitting in his car in the parking lot. I pulled in, and he got out, seemingly knowing it was me he was meeting. I told him every detail of the encounter, the guy's face, his car, and the intersection where he turned right. He took down my contact information, probably in case I needed to identify the guy later. After a few minutes, I was on my way. I'm glad I trusted my intuition and didn't get out of the car. I can only imagine what could have happened if I had.